How does a bright college student vanish into thin air? In a city that promised safety, this is not just a story about a missing girl. This is a story of trust betrayed, of a smile that never came back, and of a predator hiding in plain sight. Hannah Graham, a promising student from the University of Virginia, disappeared after what seemed like a normal night out. But her path led us to a chilling mystery, a fearful silence, and a hidden darkness far deeper than anyone expected. Who is Jessie Matthew, and how did one night change everything?
Before we continue, let me introduce myself. I'm Riyadi. Don't forget to subscribe because every week I'll be uploading 1, 2, or even 3 terrifying and bizarre true stories. Turn on notifications so you don't miss out, and share this video to help more people stay alert in any situation. Get cozy, grab a warm seat, and don't forget your coffee and favorite snacks. If you're ready, let's dive into this chilling true story for today's episode.
Bernadette Walker was a bright, artistic 17-year-old girl from Peterborough, England. She loved photography, had dreams of becoming an artist, and often shared her thoughts and creativity through journaling. On the outside, the Walker family appeared like any ordinary working-class family. Her parents, Sarah and Scott Walker, homeschooled Bernadette and her siblings. But behind closed doors, Bernadette's life was far from perfect. She had a complicated relationship with her parents, particularly with her father, Scott. In July 2020, Bernadette confided in her mother that she had been sexually abused by her father, Scott. It was a harrowing confession, and instead of receiving support, Bernadette was met with disbelief. Her mother chose to side with Scott. This betrayal crushed Bernadette. Her father now knew what she had said, and her mother had taken his side. Tension in the household reached its peak. Something terrible was about to happen. On July 18, 2020, Scott Walker picked up Bernadette from her grandparents' house, where she had stayed the night. But Bernadette never came home. Scott told police that she had jumped out of his car during an argument and ran off, but there were no witnesses, no CCTV, and no trace of her ever being seen again. The reality was far darker. That day, Scott killed his own daughter to silence her. He then returned home and, with Sarah, began an elaborate web of lies. For 2 whole days, they continued sending messages from Bernadette's phone to themselves to make it look like she was still alive. They even reported her missing on July 21st. But by then, Bernadette had been dead for days, her body never found. The police were suspicious from the start. Bernadette had no known history of running away. Her phone suddenly went dark, her social media account silent. Investigators combed through CCTV, phone data, and text messages. Slowly, the lies began to unravel. Scott and Sarah's alibi didn't match up. Digital forensic analysis found messages Scott had deleted. He had searched things like how long a body takes to decompose and can police trace deleted messages? The final nail came when investigators realized that all of Bernadette's social media activity after her disappearance was faked by her parents. In October 2021, justice was finally served. Scott Walker was convicted of Bernadette's murder, even though her body was never found, a rare achievement in UK law. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years. Sarah Walker was found guilty of perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 6 years. The courtroom echoed with emotion. Bernadette, the innocent girl who cried out for help, was never heard again, but the truth finally spoke for her. Her name now stands as a symbol of silenced voices that demand justice. The Hart family was, on the surface, the picture of progressive love and unity. Jennifer and Sarah Hart, a married lesbian couple from West Linn, Oregon, were praised on social media for adopting 6 black children from troubled backgrounds. Photos of the family at music festivals, protests, and camping trips flooded Jennifer's Facebook page. One picture even went viral, Devont Hart, one of the children, tearfully hugging a police officer during a Black Lives Matter protest, a photo that became symbolic of hope and healing. But behind the curated photos and staged smiles was a far more sinister reality. Friends and neighbors noticed the children were often thin, withdrawn, and rarely seen outside. Rumors of abuse, starvation, and psychological manipulation swirled, but each time authorities were alerted, the Harts managed to talk their way out. They were expert performers in public and careful manipulators in private. The walls began to close in during early 2018. Neighbors in Woodland, Washington, where the family had recently moved, became deeply concerned. The children began sneaking over in the middle of the night to beg for food, saying they weren't allowed to eat unless they said they were grateful. One child, Hannah Hart, even jumped from a second-story window and ran to a neighbor, begging, "Please, don't tell my moms." Concerned neighbors finally called Child Protective Services (CPS). An investigation was opened, but before social workers could intervene, Jennifer and Sarah seemed to sense that time was running out. Rather than face the consequences of years of abuse, they made a horrifying choice. On March 24, 2018, Jennifer Hart, with her wife Sarah and their 6 children Marcus, Jeremiah, Abigail, Hannah, Devont, and Sierra, packed into their SUV and began driving south along the Pacific Coast Highway. The atmosphere in the car is unknown, but evidence later showed that Sarah had taken a massive dose of Benadryl, enough to sedate a person. The children were likely unconscious or drugged. Then, on March 26th, in Mendocino County, California, Jennifer deliberately drove the family's SUV off a 100-foot cliff into the ocean. The car landed upside down on the rocks below. There were no skid marks. No sign of braking. Investigators ruled it as intentional. 3 of the children's bodies were found near the vehicle. 2 more were discovered downstream. Devont and Hannah were never found, only their clothing and remains of bone fragments were later recovered. The crash was first believed to be a tragic accident, but it didn't take long for investigators to dig deeper. Jennifer Hart had alcohol in her system, over the legal driving limit. The family's car computer revealed that the vehicle had been idling at the cliff for several minutes before accelerating. Investigators uncovered a history of CPS reports, including beatings, starvation, and isolating the children from school and medical care. More disturbingly, Sarah Hart had researched no-kill shelters, how much Benadryl is fatal, and over-the-counter medications that can cause drowsiness in children in the days leading up to the crash. All signs pointed not to an accident, but to a calculated murder-suicide. In April 2019, an official coroner's jury ruled that the crash was a murder-suicide. Jennifer Hart deliberately drove off the cliff with the intention of killing the entire family. Sarah Hart was deemed complicit, having participated in drugging the children and preparing for the act. The world was horrified. What was once seen as a progressive, loving family became a haunting example of how appearances can deceive. Devonta's iconic hug photo now feels like a ghostly echo, a silent cry for help that went unanswered. Anna Elizabeth Graham was an 18-year-old sophomore at the University of Virginia, majoring in anthropology. Born on February 25, 1996, in Reading, England, she moved to the United States at age 5. Known for her intelligence, athleticism, and vibrant personality, Hannah was a member of the university's ski and track teams and had a passion for music and volunteer work. Her disappearance in 2014 shocked the university community and the nation. On the night of September 12, 2014, Hannah attended a party with friends in Charlottesville, Virginia. Around 1:20 a.m. on September 13th, she texted a friend saying she was lost. Surveillance footage later showed her walking alone in the downtown mall area, appearing disoriented. She was last seen with Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr., a 32-year-old man, who was observed placing his arm around her and leading her away. Witnesses noted that Hannah seemed intoxicated and vulnerable. After being seen with Matthew, Hannah vanished. A massive search ensued, involving law enforcement and over 1,000 volunteers. On October 18, 2014, human remains were discovered on an abandoned property in Albemarle County, Virginia. 6 days later, the remains were confirmed to be Hannah's. The cause of death was determined to be homicide by an undetermined etiology. Investigators quickly identified Jesse Matthew as the prime suspect. He fled Virginia but was apprehended in Galveston County, Texas, on September 24, 2014. Further investigation revealed Matthew's involvement in previous sexual assault cases, including the 2009 murder of Morgan Harrington and the 2005 sexual assault in Fairfax, Virginia. DNA evidence linked him to these crimes, solidifying the case against him. In March 2016, Jesse Matthew pleaded guilty to the abduction and murder of Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington, as well as the 2005 sexual assault. He received 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The case prompted increased awareness and discussions about campus safety and the importance of reporting suspicious behavior.